my name's Becky Matanic. I'm currently a career coach at Ivy Tech South Bend. Prior to that, I was for 6 years a disabled veteran outreach program specialist at Work One. Translated, all that verbiage means I worked with veterans, helping them gain employment, better employment, or training. And I am myself an Army veteran. And although there are hiring preferences for veterans for federal jobs, many of them are open to the public. So, and one of the things the federal government has done is created this pathways program so that to attract more people towards their internships. And with the internships, I'll just get started here because I'm already talking about what's next, if I can get it to advance. The internship program, the recent graduates program, those are the two we're going to focus on here today. The goal of that is to recruit, hire, develop, and retain students and recent graduates into federal workforce. Okay. So the Presidential Management Fellows Program, that's a program at a higher level for those who have doctorate degrees, usually lawyers and some other specializations. So we're not going to spend much time on that, but just know if long-term goals, that's out there as well through federal opportunities. And I have as my wingman today, Erin Schneider, my fellow career coach. And of course, JJ is all over everything. So please raise your hand, put something in the chat, interrupt me. I will tell you that this is just an overview and it is a lot of information. Now, the good thing about it is even with all this information, at the end of the PowerPoint, there are links to more resources because I don't want to overwhelm you, but I will tell you in my training at Work One on the federal resume stuff, I've been through probably over 6 years, probably 10 days of training on how to do federal resumes and understand the whole federal job process. Now, some of it was repetitive, but today, just trying to get you an overview so you can explore and then be connected to other resources if you find something that might be of interest to you. Okay, so the pathway programs are designed to offer clear paths with paid internships for students. Okay, now there's even more bonus with this right now because, well, it's hard to say bonus in the pandemic, but because of the pandemic, the federal government, some of the agencies did adapt and started providing more virtual internships. Okay. So now that they've seen success in that, even though ideally you might want to go to an internship in person, let's say in Washington, D.C. or Tallahassee, Florida, the thing with the internships, even though they are paid, they're not going to pay your housing. So before, when you had to be at an internship, let's say you really desired one with the Bureau of Land Management in a national park or something, you would have had to been there in person and provide your own housing, which of course, even if you're getting paid, can take a chunk of change out of your budget. So now they've adapted a lot more of the internships so that you can do the internship virtually, which I think opens it up to more people because you're still going to get paid, but you don't have to worry about those housing costs for the internships. So you have those. The other thing about the paid internships with the federal government is typically they're going to pay 75 to 80% of what you would be paid if you were a permanent employee in that position. So we know some companies in the private sector do a pretty decent job with some paid internships, but there are internships that you're either not going to get paid or the pay rate is going to be really low. So a federal internship might be exactly what you need pay-wise in order to get that experience in the field you need. The next pathway program is the recent graduates. So that is somebody who has graduated with a degree I will be honest, most of the time it's a bachelor's degree that's going to qualify you rather than just an associate's degree. But you've had to, or a master's degree, depending on where you're going for and where you're at. But you have to have been within 2 years of graduating college for the recent graduates program. The exception to that is if you have military service, and then that gets a longer window there. So the Pathways programs provide training and career development for individuals starting their federal careers. These are just some of the logos of the federal agencies. So does anybody have a guess of how many federal agencies and sub-agencies the US government has? Anybody want to throw one out there?
More than 300, probably.
I was thinking 150.
Well, I was going to say 87, so now I feel really off.
Well, if we were playing Price is Right, Sharonda would be correct, but she would still be well under. Okay, there are hundreds upon hundreds of different federal agencies and sub-agencies, so many so that there isn't even agreement in Congress about how many there actually are. But they have concluded as of 2018, there's at least 485 federal agencies. So the big ones that you might think of with the federal government, like Department of Defense, Department of Labor, Treasury Department, Department of Justice, those are just some of them. So with the hundreds of different agencies, what that leads to is thousands of different job types across the federal government. So when I was talking about the internships, I was talking about the Bureau of Land Management. You know, you also have the Forest Department, Department of the Forestry. So there are, you know, if you want to be a park ranger, if you want to be a conservation officer, if you want to work with the IRS, if you want to be a CIA agent, FBI, if your passion is in the environment, you got the Environmental Protection Agency. There are plenty of organizations and basically every job title you can think of out there where you can gain experience. And the Pathways program is really designed to try to recruit for the federal government quality employees. So if you do well, although it's not a guaranteed, if you do well in your internship, most likely you're going to get an opportunity to become a permanent employee with the federal government. Okay, so yay, good information, but how the heck do I find out about this stuff? Okay, the link that is your starting point for really everything with federal jobs is USAJobs.gov. Okay, and that's displayed here. And as I said, you'll get the PowerPoint with the links at the end. You'll have access to that. So USAJobs.gov, and there's so many different things you can do here. And if you see on this homepage, they also have the special hiring that's been going on last year because of COVID. So some of these positions are still in response to the pandemic and may not be the quote unquote permanent positions. They would be positions that maybe are what are called NTE, not to exceed. So maybe it's a 2-year contract, but you still would be getting federal benefits, still qualifying for federal advantages in future hiring and positions. So it can be fun to look at some of these other opportunities that pop up. Another opportunity, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, otherwise known as FEMA. Sometimes they'll do some special hiring authorities, like if you remember back to Hurricane Katrina, they did not have enough workforce at that point with their full-time permanent people, so they recruited to get people in different specialties to help provide with that hurricane relief. So there's opportunities on this website all the time that you can look at beyond the permanent ones. Before I go too far down that rabbit hole, we'll keep moving, but just wanted to let you know about that with that COVID banner being there. So within the USA Jobs page, there is the student and recent graduates page. And even though you can navigate and find the student and recent graduate openings from the home page, this might be the best place to get started to navigate, since you're, those of you in this presentation most likely are a student or a recent graduate, to navigate from here. Now you will see, let me catch up here. On these pages, there's a wealth of information, okay? And as we were talking about before, there are so many federal agencies, and you can drop down to learn more things by any of these drop downs. So the A to Z list of federal agencies. Maybe, you know, you're like, oh, I like things with outdoors. But I don't want to be a park ranger. What other department might be able to, you know, might I think of for a career in biological sciences or things like that? Now, with that understanding, all of these agencies, if you're an IT person, you're marketable in any of them, because whether it's the Bureau of Land Management, the Treasury, Justice Department, everybody needs IT. So a lot of the career fields can be marketable across multiple agencies. So you can look at the list of federal agencies, and then what we're going to move on to next is this quick search, the federal occupations by college major. So for this example, I pulled business administration, just pulled a common one out there. And this is only a partial list of some of the positions that somebody majoring in business administration might have eligibility for, these either series of positions or specific positions. And because the government likes to do things a little funky and all that good stuff, you're going to find that they're all classified under different series. So under, for example, industrial property management series, that doesn't mean there's just one job. There's multiple jobs within that as well. Okay. But it gives you an idea of where your major, your course of study, your experience might be most marketable, and the different types of careers that you may not have even thought of to apply for, not only for an internship, but also a job. Any questions out there yet, JJ or Aaron?
Nope. I just
Okay.
said business and IT are both pretty marketable across all industries, right? Just as well as all agencies within the government.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so on the same page here, you'll also see that there's a begin your search with the search the internship jobs and search recent graduate jobs. And I was going to try to do this live to show you guys how to navigate in USA Jobs and go through a job announcement. But with having two computers up already, I'm going to stick with my screenshots. And then after we get through this, if we have time, if anybody wants me to do a live search for a specific position, we can do that too. So in this example, we click on a recent graduate link, okay? And notice, if you would, I've got 3 different recent graduate ones listed in this screenshot, okay? Now, of course, I did this PowerPoint well ahead of this presentation. So the job dates, if you see, you've got an open clock and then it has an end date. So another takeaway of things to not forget, if you are applying for a federal internship or a federal job, that end date means that end date. That means that end date for every document they need. So if you did the application, you submitted a resume, but they required your college transcripts and you didn't get them by the close date, you are no longer in consideration. There's absolutely no flexibility with that. So make sure when you're looking at jobs, you're very conscious, or internships, of those open and close dates, okay? Because they do not have the power to change that close date. So you need to look at, okay, I do need to submit college transcripts for this job. I need to upload them online. Can I get them there in that time? Okay, so it's good to make sure you're prepared with that stuff ahead of time. Most of the time, as far as college transcripts, to get you in the consideration for an internship or a job, it doesn't have to be the official sealed transcript. They're going to let you upload unofficial transcripts. But then if they make a hiring offer down the road, you are going to have to produce the actual official transcript. So don't panic that you have to get it mailed to an address in time. No, you just need the unofficial and upload those documents, okay?
I have a question though. The GS numbers, what do those mean? Like, does it depend on your degree level?
Yes, well, sort of, okay? It's government service, okay? So it's our government series, now I'm tripping over my own words. Government service or government series, and it is the pay and experience level of that position, okay? So if, Sharonda, if you were to look at the second one, the Pathways Recent Graduate Motor Carrier Safety Specialist, you'll see there that it's GS 5 through GS 9. What that means is somebody has to qualify at least at the 05 level, which is pretty much, it's not total entry level, but it's pretty much, okay, a high school diploma for sure, maybe a degree, and some experience, okay?
Okay.
And then to the GS9 level, what that's indicating there is that's the promotion potential in that series. So you could get hired as, let's say, a GS6 because you have the education and a little more experience than a more junior level, but that motor carry safety specialist does not have promotion potential beyond a GS9.
Okay.
Does that make any sense? That's where it would cap off. Now, that doesn't mean you couldn't go any further in the government than a GS9. As you're in that profession, you could be gaining additional credentials or education and then decide, okay, I still like this field, but my cap on this job is at this level. But within this career field, now that I've earned this degree and this credential, I want to apply for another job within the field that has a higher promotion potential. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
And that does get a little confusing. And what you'll see when you open a position up, it's going to give you that pay range, okay, of that position as it stands. So now as we move on within this, this is a different job now that I opened up, okay? So this is a pathway student trainee, okay? You will find when you open up a job posting or an internship posting in USA Jobs that you're going to have these overview, locations, duties, requirements, required documents, benefits, and how to apply. Some sections will be longer or shorter than others. One of the first things you should do is read this overview section. Now, I'm using one that everybody here, assuming you're a student, would be eligible to apply for, because you see on the right, it says this job is open to Native American students and veterans, okay? If you're a student, you don't have to be a Native American student or a Native American veteran student. You just have to meet one of those qualifying areas that it says that the position is open to, okay? once again here, like I said, make sure that you're spending, pay attention to those open and closing dates, okay? Now, of course, I uploaded this one in my PowerPoint 3.3 on March 3rd, and when I did that, so the closing date is 3/19/2021. So to be honest with you, with today being the 16th of March, completing a whole federal application packet, if it's only 3 days away, you're going to struggle to do it, okay? Because it is a lot of work, but it very well can be worth it. Under service, you see competitive there. What that means is that from all those areas of who the job is open to, they have the ability to select any of those qualified candidates, okay? If you see non-competitive, you need to read into there more deeply on who the job is open to, because that's likely indicating that it's an internal hire, because sometimes it's only open to an agency, but it's not going to be a student training pathway. So I'm not going to go into that too deep, but just pay attention to that stuff. You'll see here the pay scale and grade. GS2 through GS4, those are entry-level positions. But as you see here, the student trainee, you've got that pay salary range. So you know what type of work you would be able to, what type of pay you might be able to get while you're in that position as a trainee, which is, I would argue, at least in this area, a little bit better than you're probably going to get at most internships. The appointment type, you're probably not going to have to worry too much about digging deeper into what that means. It just, but in this case, it just means that they have options on, since the job is open to Native American students and veterans, there are, I'm trying to explain, different hiring echelons they can achieve. And then the work schedule is full time. So it's going to let you know that. As we dig deeper into this job announcement, as I said, the headers at the top, make sure you're looking at the requirements, because you had the how to apply, who's eligible, who it's open to, but then you got to dig deeper into the requirements, because you don't want to do all the work for an internship package or a job application, and then for you to find out 3 hours after you sent it that you were never eligible to apply for that position anyway, okay? So you check the conditions of employment, make sure that you are indeed eligible for that position, okay? And then the qualifications is a key thing to not only read to see if you're either obtaining the skills necessary for the qualifications and you want to obtain those skills, but also in assisting you in doing your application packet or your resume for the internship. Because if you're reading, and since this is a trainee position, you're not expected to know everything on there. If this was a permanent position, you would probably be expected to know how to do most of these duties already. But this is training you. But still, you want to make sure, okay, qualifications, I'm going to get training in assembling data, consolidating and preparing reports, gathering and analyzing requested information, blah, 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 blah. So read that and say, okay, is this something that I would want to do, receive training in, gain mentorship in, and does it help lead to my future career goals as well? Okay. All right. Then here, we're still under requirements. You got to read the internship program requirements too, because when we're on further up on the page, it didn't have the GPA requirement. So you always want to make sure all the requirements that you meet or exceed those. Okay. And then you'll get to this point within the page with required documents. And let me go over the background checks and security clearance too. Different positions within the federal government require different types of clearances. But basically every employer these days does some sort of background check. You will see what type of security clearance will be needed for an internship or a recent graduate job that you apply for. You will, if you get into the hiring process, like if they refer you for an interview, then you will fill out a very long form for them to do the background check. And the background check and how extensive that is based on the type of position and level of access that you would need to have to any sort of material. So it's not really anything for you to worry about when you're looking at it to apply. But just keep that in mind. If you're applying for a position with a top secret security clearance, it's going to take a long time. That doesn't mean you can't get hired before it happens, but it's going to take a long time, and they'll be going back to your third grade teacher and more. Okay. So just think of that as well. On the required documents, this is kind of like what I was saying before. You need to make sure that you read the job or internship announcement thoroughly, because you wouldn't want to do the work to get everything in, and then it turned out that you needed to send a copy of your high school diploma too, and you didn't do that. And then boom, even if they thought you were the best qualified candidate, their hands are tied because you didn't meet the application deadlines. So make sure that you thoroughly read the required documents. And then further, the how to apply. Okay. This will help kind of be a double check to make sure, okay, I got my documents. This is what it wants me to do with my documents. These are the steps that I need to take. Now, a key thing here that is, even though they don't have a specific person listed, this can be an advantage about federal government, okay? If you apply to a private sector company, yes, you can go ahead and strategically maybe make a phone call to follow up on an application, but you really, I mean, you don't want to throw yourself out of qualification because you're calling over, hey, is so-and-so going to review my application, this, that, and the other. The federal government, you do and can, and at times it can be advantageous to you to actually contact the number or the email of what's listed on that job announcement. And I'll give you an example. It can be helpful before you apply in case you do have a question because you really don't understand something about the application process. But I caution you, don't call or email if if you haven't thoroughly read the announcement, because that's going to take a hit on you if you call and say, oh, do you need my college transcripts? And it says right there, you need to upload your college transcripts. It's like, okay, you're not showing attention to detail to read the whole announcement. But if there is a question you have that you can't find specifically in the announcement, go ahead and contact. Another thing, and I'll go into this a little more later, that's really good. And most of the time, instead of just having a generic email address, they're actually going to have a person listed. But I had a female veteran that I worked with at Work One, and she had a point of contact. She was in the medical field and she was trying to get into a VA clinic in a medical administration position. And the first time that she applied for a position, she was deemed eligible for the position. She was referred to the hiring authority, but she did not get an interview. Okay. So that means that in the end, she wasn't getting hired. She wasn't down to the final candidates. but she ended up contacting the point of contact on the job announcement. And I'm not saying this is going to happen with every person you contact, but asked her for some feedback on the resume she submitted. The woman that was the point of contact on the job actually spent an hour with her, giving her tips on how to improve her resume, how it would have allowed her to better qualify her as one of the most highly qualified for the position. She took those suggestions, applied for a similar position at a different VA clinic, and she's been working there now for 5 years. So you can't call Lippert or Cummins or some, well, I don't want to badmouth a company, but you typically cannot call a private sector company and say, hey, you got my resume. Will you please tell me what you didn't like about it? Okay. Or how I could have improved it. So this is a real advantage with having the contact information as long as you use it responsibly. Any questions at this point? Okay, then we will move on. Okay, you will find, and this is a great saving time tool for yourself, on almost every position that you might find on USA Jobs, usually under the how to apply header, you will find a link to a questionnaire. And the questionnaire is the greatest check on whether you should be applying for the job or not. Because even applying for private sector jobs, if you do it correctly, it takes time because you got to tailor your resume to each private sector job, at least do some tweaks. You got a cover letter, you got the online application. It takes time for the private sector. It takes a lot of time to apply for a federal job or a federal internship. And knowing that most of them are quite competitive, meaning a lot of people apply for federal jobs because there are a lot of benefits that are appealing to people with federal jobs. Now, as I kind of alluded to before we officially got started, you can start a career with the federal government, and you can not only live all over the US, you could live all over the world. And you're not serving in the military, so you don't have to wear combat boots and carry a rifle. But like if you want to work for the State Department, boom. You want to be a foreign service officer, even working with, if you work with the Department of Defense, you could, be serving over in Germany as a civilian on an army post over in Germany, or in Egypt on an air force, all over the place, but you'd be doing it as a civilian. So a lot of people apply for federal jobs because there are excellent benefits. You're not going to make as much as you make on Wall Street if you were like a stockbroker or things like that, but it is good income with excellent benefits and retirement plans, depending on your specialty. Like if you're an FBI agent, I'm not saying you're going to get Friday and Saturdays off on a holiday weekend or anything like that. But typically, if you're a federal government employee in an office environment, IT, you get all these federal holidays off, you accrue vacation time real quick. So there's a lot of benefits. So there's a lot of people that do seek federal employment. And the other thing about that, I was talking about traveling all over the world, because once you get into the federal government, if you're a good employee, then, you can bid on other jobs and, move different places. But let's say you want to be a federal employee, but you're like, hey, I'm staying right here in the Midwest. I'm staying in Indiana. I want to stay in my town. Does that limit the number of opportunities that you'll have? Yeah, but there are federal jobs all over the US. So, any town of a decent size has some federal properties. In Indiana, we have the US Southern and Northern District. So you got the federal courthouse there. You have FBI field offices in Indianapolis, and I believe up north in Hammond. You got a DOJ office in Hammond, Indiana. I'm sure Evansville has. So there are federal jobs, and of course, any There's, I think, 15 VA clinics across Indiana. So if healthcare is your thing, you got Veteran Affairs. There are federal jobs local too. But of course, if you're willing to move, that's going to open up the world a lot to you as far as different opportunities. But anyway, back to the questionnaire. The questionnaire is going to have first a bunch of qualifying information, like how do you qualify for this job as far as your eligibility to apply for it. So if it's a pathways program for a student internship, you know, you're going to qualify because you're a current student, but it'll have you check off on those things. Where you really get into the nitty gritty of whether you should spend the time applying for a job, and this is my opinion, but based on a lot of experience, is when you get to different questions like the ones listed on this slide. And I understand that it's would be hard to see. But for example, this one is asking, write and prepare articles and other information for release in publications, social media platforms, and website. Okay, so this is an example questionnaire for somebody seeking a public affairs position. So what I can pretty much tell you is if you're going through a questionnaire and you have to answer A or B, which is I have not had education or I've had education, but I haven't done any of it yet, it's probably not worth your time applying for the position because there's going to be plenty of people who are able to answer D or E, where you're either very proficient or you're an expert in the field. Now, sometimes if you have to give a C answer, like, okay, I've done this task a little bit, but I still had to be closely supervised, you're okay. But if you're basically applying for jobs where everything you're saying, well, nope, all I've had is a little education or I've had no education at all, the chances are substantially high that there are going to be a lot of other qualified people ahead of you. And the way that for internships and for federal jobs, the people that do the rating and decide who moves forward to the hiring authority, they can't be subjective at all. They have to read the information that is provided. So, for example, if you have, let's say you were going to be, you applied to a medical assistant position at a VA clinic. And on your resume, you put that you were a medical assistant at Dr. Smith's office in Indianapolis for 5 years, but you didn't put exactly what you did as far as like, okay, greeted patients, filed records according to HIPAA regulations. That person rating your resume cannot give you credit for tasks that you have not specifically stated that you have and have done. They are not allowed to assume even on what is would be basically understood things. So for example, if somebody said they were a waitress, you would assume that they probably serve customers food. But if they put they were a waitress on a resume, but they didn't put that they serve food, that rater at the federal level cannot give them credit for serving food to customers. Okay, so you got to be really specific with that stuff.
Hey, Becky.
Yeah.
Just so as a time reminder, we do have about 12 minutes until we need to wrap up.
Okay. So when you get to USA Jobs, what you're going to want to do is create an account. And so you'll find it's easy to do that, create an account. Then when you log in after you create an account, you will have a home. I already have a profile on USA Jobs. And then where you're going to want to go is create a profile. So you put your information. It doesn't take that long to create a profile. And then after you do that, the next thing you want to do is go to the documents page. Okay. And the documents page, you should have seen the little tab on the top of the screen. You can upload or build resumes. Okay. This is pretty much the only time I tell or advise people to use the template on the website. The federal resume and federal resume for applying for internships too is a unique thing. It is not like a civilian resume. Federal resumes, and if you're a student and you're, you don't have much civilian work experience, yours wouldn't be this long. But somebody very experienced, I'm 53, so somebody who has tons of work experience like me, it is possible that you could have a 7 to 9 page federal resume. We would never advise you to submit a resume that long in the civilian sector. But a federal resume, if it's necessary, you do it. So you want to, because as I said before, they can't credit you with experience based on assumption. They're just not allowed to. Okay, so you have to show that experience, the skills, and the education you have. So I recommend use the resume builder. Okay, another thing that's unique about federal resumes is that they want you to list your salary information. Okay, so you need to do that. So if you're a student, obviously you don't have salary information, but let's say, your last job was working at Burger King and it was $8 an hour, you still need to list that. Okay. And then you'll see on the resume builder average hours per week. This is important. If you were working a manufacturing job and you were working averaging 50, 60 hours a week, it's not so important that you put 50, 60 hours. It's just important that you hit that 40-hour threshold. Because when they're looking at experience to evaluate your experience for qualifying and against others, it's the 40-hour work week that allows them to give you credit for 1 year of experience, let's say, as a medical assistant, because you work 40 hours per week for a year, or average that. Now, they will give you credit part-time experience too, but of course that equals half the time. So the resume builder will take you through what you need to do, and you want to just keep following it through. You can save and you can come back to it because it does take time. On your resume name, what I recommend is you title it by the position you're applying to. Okay, so the title of the position is the name you want your resume to say. And then after you finish adding your work experience, it's going to ask you to add education as well. This is a sample, 1 page of a sample federal resume, how it turns out with the template. So if you look at that, it has the hours per week, the salary, where it was applicable. I don't know why they didn't have the salary on the second one, but you should have that, and that template will take you through that. Okay. As I emphasize, with a federal resume, it is not like your private sector resume. Does that mean you can't benefit from using your private sector resume? Yeah, there's probably plenty of bullet points and experience and things that you can transfer from, but you want to use that resume builder. Aaron knows I was a journalist in the Army, so he's heard me preach this over and over and over again. You cannot proofread your own stuff. As you guys know, your eyes will play tricks with you. They'll read words ahead and all this good stuff. And using the resume builder in USA Jobs, you definitely can't proofread your own stuff. So the suggestion is, once you complete it, okay, you want to drop it into a Word document, pretty it up, and then convert it to PDF, but make sure that you've had somebody proofread it along, of course, go through it again yourself, but you want somebody else to look at it again. And then once you've gone through all those steps, then you can upload your resume because you did use it as a build your resume template. So that way you can really help yourself with making sure you got everything in there and having a career coach review that resume for you. tips again, and this part is true for both private sector and federal jobs. Refer to that job announcement. I am still old school, so I will print it out and use a highlighter because it's telling you in that job announcement exactly the skills and experience they are looking for. So even if your experience is a bit different, for example, let's say there's a federal position where it's about, well, I'll give a real life example. I had a supply sergeant from the Army who was applying for a job at the VA that included accountability for rounding up the VA wheelchairs each day. So just because on active duty, he wasn't responsible for wheelchairs, but he was responsible for tires. Okay, there's a parallel there. So being able to demonstrate that all right, this one calls for me to be accountable for wheelchairs. I was accountable for tires. So I match up there as far as being able to perform that task and having experience in that. So use that job announcement because you really need to show where you have matches on the skills and experience. Additionally, ONET Online, which was covered a bit in previous workshops with Interest Profiler, but onetonline.org, go to that site, look at different job descriptions. It will help you very much with bullet points with the federal resume. As I said, highlight your similar experience, duties, and responsibilities, and do not submit without having your resume reviewed. Okay. My additional tips on federal resumes is, as I mentioned before, if you apply for a position, you can contact that number, the person, at the end when you find out whether you were referred or not referred to the hiring authority, which is typically the next step, and find out, okay, what was what was lacking in your resume, and like I said, I don't expect most of them to spend an hour with you like that one lady did with the female vet I was helping with, but you can still get that feedback. They are required to give you some feedback on where your resume was. So I don't want to insult anybody who might be from South Dakota or might want to go to South Dakota, but what I'm meaning here is, let's say you want to be licensed practical nurse at the VA, but you don't want to be a licensed practical nurse at a VA in South Dakota, but you see that position open. Go ahead and apply to it. That way you get your resume rated. You can see if they determined you eligible and referred you to the hiring authority. If they did, then hey, that means that it's probably good to use that same resume for an LPN position in Indianapolis. Now, does that guarantee that you'll get referred to the hiring authority and interviewed in Indianapolis? No, because maybe there's more applicants in Indianapolis and there's 2 or 3 that are better qualified than you than there were in South Dakota. But it does give you an idea of whether you're going to meet that threshold of having that resume that really is selling you and matching you to the position that you're interested in. Okay. As I said, utilize the point of contact listed at the end of the job announcement, but don't be calling just ask a question that you should already be able to find the answer to. But the feedback on the resume, you can call on that. And then finally, digging deeper. Okay, as I said, all those federal agencies, the majority of them do post jobs on USA Jobs. You will find that the CIA, the FBI, Drug Enforcement Agency, and the State Department do post jobs too on USAJobs.gov, but they do not post all their opportunities there. Okay, so if you basically, when you're talking national security at a very for positions that require top secret type positions, very sensitive positions, you're best to go to that agency specific website to find out the application information and any additional jobs they may have posted there that may not be posted on USA Jobs. But if you're just looking for like Office of Personnel Management, Government Accounting Agency, Government Accounting Office, things like that, you can pretty much find any opportunity they have on USAJobs.gov. So I recommend always starting with USA Jobs. And then if you need to dig any deeper for any of the specialized ones, like I said, CIA, FBI, DEA, look there. And if you want to be a foreign service officer, yeah, that's an application through the State Department, which is much longer and exhaustive than your typical USA Jobs job posting. Okay. As I say, yikes, information overload. I know it's a ton of information, but you will have the PowerPoint, the resources to help you, your CCEC team, federal resume examples, and PowerPoint presentation. Here are the longer resources that if you find a position that you want to apply to on USA Jobs, the woman that is giving the classes on the resume builder, she is a federal civilian employee that I believe works at an Army base and teaches those leaving the Army how to do resumes. So she's got these YouTube videos. They're all about 12 to 15 minutes each section, I think it is, but they're really, really good, spot on how to do things. As I mentioned and emphasized the questionnaire, she goes much more into depth on that, how to build your resume. Then there's another resource with using ONET for your federal resume. The hiring process, which I've only sort of tapped into with referred to hiring authority, selected, this, that, and the other. So there's a lot of stuff there as well. The hiring process is explained in that video. So that is a whole lot of stuff, but I hope that people might have learned a thing or two and know that you can reach out if you have any additional questions.